And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Survivor podcast. Me and Ryan back once again to recap Survivor Season 45, Episode 5 on this Sunday morning. What's up, Ryan?
Dylan, I am doing great. I was thinking after this podcast, we could make a Nerd Alliance and we can go outside and play some Pokemon Go.
Yeah, that would sound great to me. But yeah, that was wild moments this episode. But yeah, it's so funny because like everyone talked about like what we were gonna get out of the 90-minute episodes, and like that's the type of stuff that we're getting added in. And that's pretty funny to see. So I do like that. But we're gonna take a deep dive into episode 5, Survivor Season 45, like we normally do. I'm excited to get going. Pretty like traditional episode, I guess, minus like the journey.
Yeah.
I thought it's great to keep seeing a lot of camp moments like the Pokemon Go moment. I think that that like whole like storyline to the point where like they were like so similar but like couldn't work together. They just couldn't work together. It was very interesting, I thought. And it was like kind of built up the entire episode that it was going to be between Drew and Brando, who ended up going home. Ultimately, Brando goes home, who was, I believe, one of my favorites to win in terms of who I picked before the season. So unfortunate to see on that front. What were your thoughts overall on the episode? And then we could dive into the vote.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I thought it was a good episode. Obviously, I feel like I might dock a point or two for, the journey, especially when the journey is like post challenge and somebody potentially can, go away from camp and kind of get screwed in some ways. So I don't love that. And I also thought we kind of went a little backstory heavy this week with some personal moments where we haven't had those in the last 3 weeks. But no, other than those two new era things, I thought it was, like you said, a traditional type of swap episode, nothing too crazy. But yeah, no, I think the vote was something that we definitely had to discuss because heading into this episode after last week's swap, we said if Blue Tribe goes to Tribal, and I was kind of hoping they would lose just so I could see what would happen. You have two former Reba, you have two former Bello, so red and blue, and you have Emily in the middle. So Dylan, the big question we have to discuss is, did Emily make the right choice going with Austin and Drew? I think she did. What do you think?
Yeah, I think she did also. Now again, you made a good point. I think it was kind of built up last episode that we eventually were going to see this Blue Tribe, the new Bello tribe, go to Tribal Council. And it's funny because I just thought, I was like, when I first saw the tribes when it swapped last week, I was like, oh, Red is so screwed.
Yeah.
Credit to them, they dominated the challenge this week. So good for them. But we get Bello this week at Tribal Council, and like you said, it was kind of teased last week and built up this week that Emily being in the middle of what was 2 original Bella and 2 original Reba, so 2 original blue, 2 original red. You had Brando on one side with Kendra, and then you had Austin on one side with Drew. Now, did Emily make the right choice going with Austin and Drew? I kind of never thought she was going with Brando and Kendra. Like, there was never a point where I was like, I really think she's going to flip to the other side. I think that like they tried to maybe make it seem like it was maybe closer than it was, but I don't think it was a decision the entire, it was a decision. I don't think it was much of a decision the whole time. To me, it was just like, if you looked at her reaction when like she approached Austin and Drew that first time and she was so excited to work with them, like I felt like at that point it was near set in stone, right? Now, was it the right decision to go that way? I think to me, it's like, you know what? Like, if those are the people you're comfortable with and those are the people you trust, then it is the right decision. That's kind of how I feel at this stage for her. Now I know a lot of people are saying, I saw the arguments of, I guess, to play devil's advocate to what we're saying is like some people were saying, well, why would you go with Austin and Drew when they're like such a strong 2 and you would be the third? When you can maybe tie in and get a little closer to like Brando and he could be maybe like one of your top people. Whereas he's like Brando and Kendra aren't that close. So maybe like he'd be willing to get rid of Kendra first before you. But I think like, that's thinking way too long term, in my opinion. It's like you got to make sure you get as far in the game as you possibly could at this point. What gives you the opportunity to do that? And it's for sure Austin and Drew, and we know that once the tribe once the merge happens next week, which merging at 13, interesting. But once the merge happens next week, we know that Austin and Drew have numbers like at the merge as well. So I think, or it seems like I think they're going to, especially bringing back D into the fold with Julie. Like I feel like it was the right move for Emily for sure. And then, obviously as the game progresses, she can make her decision if she wants to continue on that path or not.
Yeah, so I think there's some good points there. I think she did make the right choice for a couple of reasons. To go with the Brando and Kendra side for a second, I think the reason why they showed us there was a chance of her going that way was because we kind of forgot, because they didn't show it in the episode because of Hannah's quit, that a twist in episode 1 was Blue Tribe got to send someone to Yellow to talk with them before Tribal and cast a vote, and Kendra went. And from Brando's exit press, it sounds like Kendra and Emily got pretty close. So when they swapped, he comes into that swap thinking, I already kind of have Kendra a little bit, not much, but I have her from the former Blue Tribe, and she's close with Emily. So we already have a 3-2 advantage. Maybe he took his foot off the gas. Maybe he didn't make as many promises as Austin and Drew did. There's a chance that Brando said, we'll keep you safe through the next few votes. We'll work with you. Meanwhile, Austin and Drew probably were like, we're going to go far. We're going to go final 4, final 3. And Emily's a numbers person. She's very logical. She probably thinks there may be a better offer. I'm going to go with them. I made the analysis and I have more long-term gains with Austin and Drew. The other thing that I didn't consider until I, got to think more about the episode was like, she and Bruce don't get along from episode 1. And there's a chance that if she goes with Brando and with Kendra and goes with the former Blue Tribe, Bruce might be a little bit of a sticking point in that path going forward. So maybe she feels like there's a path of least resistance going with Austin and Drew versus the Blue Tribe, and she's going to have to clash with Bruce again. But I think if you kind of add it all up between Brando and Kendra not making as strong of a pitch as Austin and Drew, maybe taking their foot off the gas a bit, and also Brando's lie that we'll get into as we go through the episode. But I feel like a couple things added up where she kind of just made more sense for her to go with Austin and Drew.
Yeah, and Brando, like he kind of got caught playing a little bit too hard. I feel like, even though your back's against the wall, you got to do what you got to do. But he did get caught in that lie, right? Which was not great. I mean, he basically proposed this whole thing to Drew and was like, I'll hand you my shot in the dark. At like, if you guarantee that you vote Kendra tonight or whatever, just to say, to save himself. And then Drew, like, it's so funny how hard Brando tried this entire episode to like work with Drew, even for one episode. And Drew was just not having it. Drew did not believe a single thing he said the entire episode, even though he legitimately like did want to work with him. So I thought that was so interesting. And then, I mean, for that to just immediately come back to Kendra and to everybody, everybody knew that this was something that kind of Brando said. And then I thought he actually like played it off pretty well at first, where he was, I believe he was approached by he was approached by somebody who called him out for the lie, and then he was like he like turned it on Drew. He's like, oh, it was Drew's idea. I thought it was like he kind of did that, but then by the time that like everybody found out about it, it was kind of clear that it was more so like a Brando thing. So it's tough. It's like when you're in that situation, if you're Brando, that you're probably going home tonight if Emily doesn't go your way. So like I feel like at the same, it's tough because you got to play hard, but also like you got to save yourself, and you don't want to play too hard. It's kind of a tough needle to thread. Now I want to ask you about this. Yeah. We had spoken for a while now. We're like, there was idols found on the red beach, and there was idols found on the yellow beach. I was thinking that there was going to be an unfound idol that was going to maybe come into play here. Still nothing. Nobody ever found anything on the Bello beach.
So Brando talked about this a bit in his exit press, because everyone was like, not only this episode did you look forward to, did you try to find it, but also why did we never see it in the first 4 episodes? Apparently there was some type of like unspoken like rule at Bello, or some type of like the culture at camp, so to say, was like, don't go looking for idols, don't make yourself a target, go off in pairs, go get firewood in a group. And we actually saw, ironically, this episode on the new Yellow Tribe, Katora kind of gets called out for looking for idols by herself. And I think that kind of just shows you a little bit of what the culture was like at Bella, where they weren't really looking. Maybe that was like Bruce telling people, like, don't be suspicious, going off by herself. But I guess they just never looked in the past, which is why they never found it. And then in this episode, I mean, I guess Brando was saying that I guess maybe he looked for a little bit, but they just never found it. But I guess that kind of explains why it hasn't really been a point up until now. And Dylan, we might be up to the point where this might be one of only like 3 idols in history that kind of like die, that was never found before the merge, unless they go back to the blue camp after this the mergatory, whatever it is. Because at this point, unless they put it back into the game, that idol's never going to be found, I don't think.
Yeah, not the worst thing ever.
No.
One less idol, but I did think it was interesting because, like, you know, Brand, to me it's like if you're gonna play hard, like if you're gonna go and play hard, if you're Brando, right, you're in a tough spot. It's like I would rather go out that way, like trying to find the idol, and maybe he did end up looking and we didn't see, but like maybe I would rather go out like that way than like get yourself caught in lies. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of surprised that like somebody that like Brando, who seems like he was going to be like a sneaky, quiet player, didn't like go off kind of looking. You know what I mean? But yeah, that was just one other point I wanted to bring up. Now, oh yeah, okay. So I would say go chronologically, but I feel like it makes sense to almost work backwards here.
Okay.
So there's a couple other things I want to talk about. So in this vote, right, Austin sacrifices his vote as we see. This is the whole thing we saw with Sabai's idol. Austin sacrifices his vote to extend the life of his idol, but then uses the goodwill advantage to restore his vote that he sacrificed, and then it ends up being a normal 3-2 vote, right?
Yeah.
So this was a big question that we had in previous episodes. Could you use the goodwill advantage to offset, you know, the idol type thing where you have to sacrifice your vote? And clearly the answer is yes, it happened in this episode. What are your thoughts on that? Should that be allowed for the goodwill advantage to offset sacrificing your vote? Because I feel like it was almost like a loophole that was used. What are your thoughts on all this? I think that when Survivor like put both of these advantages in the game at once, I mean, obviously they could have foreseen that this was potentially possible, but I don't think that they foresaw the same person having both advantages. So what are your thoughts on this? Should this be allowed?
So I'm of 2 minds of this. You know, obviously, to start negative, I feel like when you have a lot of advantages and they can kind of feed into each other, you're kind of like breaking your game and introducing things to kind of fix what you did. So I don't love the whole concept of it. Now, having said that, I like that it's very universal. I feel like we would be getting very ticky-tack if it was like, well, this works for a sacrifice vote, but this won't work for a risked vote. Like if you risk it at the journey, that doesn't count. But if you sacrifice it at tribal, that counts. So I feel like the fact that they were like, any lost votes you can restore, I think that makes it better. It makes it less fluky, like the whole Suri and Sarah thing where it's like, oh, I didn't know the whole like the legality, or I didn't know the whole like fine print. So I like it that it's more universal. I still feel like if you are introducing things that kind of compound onto things, it gets a little fluky, but probably wasn't the worst thing. At least now the goodwill is out of the game. And now Austin has an idol that is good through merge, which is next week. But if he risks it one more time, it goes until like final 5 or 6. So knowing the position that Austin's in, Dylan, I think he's going to sacrifice it again, unless he ends up on the losing half that loses next week's challenge. That's my theory.
Yeah, I think he should be able to sacrifice it again. Like I don't think he'll have an issue, and he's in a good enough spot in the game where I don't foresee that being an issue. Yeah. So Austin's going to end up, I think, having his idol until the final 6, which will basically, or final 5, or final 6. I don't know which.
It's I have it right here. It's final 5.
Final 5. So it's just a normal idol, right? Right. Okay. Final 5. So he's gonna end up having a normal idol. So good for Austin. I think that he'll pretty easily do that next week, unless something crazy happens that I don't think. But yeah. Now Austin gonna have this full idol, but I want to talk about another thing that Austin was involved with this week, which I think was the big topic of the episode, regardless of, you know, vote out and everything. And that was the great old debate of Sandwich versus Amulet. And again, we had this journey, right? They had to choose between substance and strategy. You had Jay, Kelly, and Austin go off on this journey, right? They get all the way to the top of the hill and their sandwiches sitting there, or they could take an amulet. So if they get the amulet, they each would have, I guess, like 1/3 of an amulet. It's kind of like from season 42. It requires all active pieces to be played at once to earn an extra vote for 3 pieces. If it gets down to 2, it is a vote steal. And if it gets down to 1, then you could turn that into an idol.
Yeah.
So we had Jay who wanted to do the amulet. You had Austin who was like, this is not actually an advantage. I want to take the sandwiches. And then you had Kelly who was in the middle who, Kelly, we've seen as she's a player that kind of has laid low not laid low. She's played a very social game, right? So she was, debating like, do I want the advantage or do I continue to kind of just go with my social game and just not deal with any advantages? She ends up going with the J side and taking and doing the amulet. So Austin, and again, it was majority decision, which is the big thing here. So Austin did not have a choice. He had to take this amulet. He had to be tied to these 2 players based on the decision that was made. To me, the decision is clear. If I am on the show and I am deciding, there is not a chance that I am taking this amulet. Or, obviously Austin didn't have a choice, but if it was my choice, and I was the one making the decision for everybody, there is not a chance that I would take this amulet. To me, it is more of a disadvantage than an advantage. And I think that I'm gonna say here that if Kelly does not win the game, then I think that it may be because of this. Like I feel pretty strongly that it was a the wrong decision for her. And it's a simple reason that you're literally painting a target on your back. What are the actual chances that Kelly, Austin, and Jay are all going to work together? I think that based on what we've seen, very, very minimum, like very minimum. It would surprise me if these 3 end up working together. And in that sense, I think that they're all going to target each other basically as soon as they hit the same beach, which is going to be a problem, right? I think Jay is probably the most in danger is in way more of a dangerous spot than Austin and Kelly. So I think that probably she'll be eliminated like shortly after they do merge. But in terms of Kelly, I thought that like she was in a perfectly safe position. I thought that she, had all the bonds on all the beaches that she had touched. I thought that she was playing a phenomenal social game. And now you put that at risk by taking this amulet, and basically Austin is saying, well, now and he literally said it. He said it to the camera. He said, I'm going to make them pay for me not having the sandwich, and I'm going to vote them out and get an idol for myself. So now Kelly just has a huge target on her back that I don't think she would have had for a while, at least, if she did not take the amulet. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, before I get into all my thoughts, Dylan, just to kind of go back to your point about, Austin making them pay, the irony is not lost upon me that we get a clip this episode that we'll get more into where, Caleb is like, Kelly's really good at this game. She's really sneaky. She has a lot of connections. Wouldn't surprise me if at some point Austin, informs Caleb that we went on this journey and we had these amulets, and Caleb goes, oh, Kelly's got even more power now. Now she really has to go. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. I agree with your thoughts completely. Amulet, definitely up there for one of the worst advantages, along with safety without power, because like you said, it literally puts a bounty on your head and forces people to kind of like target you, because what it comes down to is you knocking out the other people for the idol. And production knows this. Production knows you are never going to get 3 people to work together for an extra vote. Not only is it pointless, but like you mentioned, very rarely will all 3 of those people be on the same page. Like last time we saw this was Lindsay, Hai, and Drea, and they were not on the same page. So you're never going to have people combining for a measly extra vote. You could argue if like Austin and Drew had this together, sure, they would combine maybe for a 2-person like vote steal. I could see that. But really what it comes down to is you getting a target on your back, and Austin's like, I'm a social, likable, athletic guy. I already have a target. I don't need this. And he's going to make them pay. I feel like I love food. I would have went for the sandwich myself regardless. And I wouldn't want a bounty on my head. But yeah, I mean, like Austin probably did the best that he could, right, Dylan? It's like, I don't want this, but it's majority rules. If I push like really hard against it, it's just going to make me look bad. I have to just kind of acquiesce and go with it. So he probably played it off the best that he could. My question to you, though, Dylan, is do you think he did the right thing going back to camp and then telling the whole group about this whole fake sweat type of challenge, but then telling Emily and Drew the truth? Because I think that maybe is really what won Emily over. That like he tells basically this whole story to Brando and Kelly, but then he tells Emily and Drew, no, I actually got this amulet. And Emily probably felt really good about Austin after that.
Yeah. So what do I think about him telling them? So Brando's out of the game right now, so it doesn't matter what he told him, right? So I basically I guess Kendra is the only person on that new Bello tribe that does not know like what actually happened. So him telling Drew, I think was fine, right? Because they've pretty much shared everything with each other. They know what each other have. Him telling Emily, so here's the thing. If it won Emily over, it's worth it, obviously. So that's like, I think that's the most important thing. If Emily was going to go with them anyway, and there was no way of them knowing that, but like in a theoretical situation, if she was like locked in with them anyway, then I probably hide that information from her. I think that like if Emily ends up getting further than Austin and further than Drew, then it could be potentially that he they overshared too much. I think Emily's doing like such a good job, and it's kind of crazy the growth arc that she had. Like if you would have just in pre-merge, if you would have told me on day one that she was going to be getting fed information about advantages from Austin, I would have been like, are you kidding me? Like, so good job on Emily. Like from a social standpoint, kind of being in that spot to get it done. And I know part of it is kind of the luck of the draw with the tribe swap, but yeah, what do I think of him telling her? I probably would have withheld it from Emily, but again, like if they felt like they needed to do that in order to get her in with them, then I think it's like something you have to do just to get past his vote.
Yeah. I think the whole thing with Emily is so fascinating because like we saw in the episode with Brando, they're all kind of facing a lot of like whiplash because episode 1, they see Emily, being very, kind of like she's very anti-Bruce, right? And then at the first journey, it was Brandon. Who was it in the first episode? It was Brandon. See, the problem with these journeys is I can't remember anything. It was Brandon, Bruce, and Drew.
Yeah.
And they were like, how's your tribe? And Brandon's like, Emily's kind of rubbing people the wrong way. So when they swap, Austin, Drew, Brando, and Kelly are like, Kendra are like, oh, great, Emily, she's so negative. And what did Brando? Brando's like, oh, she's so like pleasant and nice. Like they kind of got Emily after Caleb kind of like worked on her. Now she's agreeing about aliens and stuff. So it's so interesting to see like you just said, Emily being fed this information when you probably thought, oh, Emily's going to be, because in the back in the day, Dylan, the whole strategy was like, you vote out, Rob Cesternino, you vote out the swing vote. But that's not happening. And I think that's a testament to Emily really improving her social game. And that's really after Caleb kind of, talked her down, said, I need you to kind of reel it back in a little bit. And yeah, no, Emily's playing it really well. And now she's in a good spot with Austin and Drew. Probably also by extension, Dee and Julie. But now, Dylan, we're going to get to an interesting point where, Emily might be on one side, but Caleb might be more in with the former blue people with Jake and Kelly and Bruce and stuff and Katora. So we'll see what happens come this fake merge.
Yeah, I could kind of, I definitely foresee this being a situation where Caleb and Emily try to basically pull like a Tika and kind of just play the middle the entire time.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they're going to be able to successfully do that without being kind of caught early. So we'll have to see if they do pick a side or if they continue to just bounce back and forth, vote to vote.
I will say it does feel a lot like last season where you're going to have two big tribes at merge going after each other, where you have like the Tika 3, but now you're going to have Emily and Caleb in that middle spot being able to swing back and forth. But also like last season, you have like these two sides are not happy families. Because last season you had Danny wanting to get rid of Franny and whatnot. And now this season, it's not like all of Blues together, all of Reds together. You have Katurah and Bruce not liking each other. You have D, Julie, and Jay not liking Sifu. So you would think it's like, okay, blue versus red, and Emily and Caleb have to pick a side. I could easily see next week, Katurah's like, we got to get Bruce out. And then Jay's like, I got to get Sifu out. So Emily and Caleb, not to quote the intentional Matt Singh again, Dylan, but like, you got to think Emily and Caleb are in this for the long run once again.
Yeah, I'm looking at the way you kind of just like mapped everything out, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this was maybe not the right season to merge at 13.
Like fake merge. I mean, they'll merge at 12, but yeah, you're right.
It's like there are definitely a few players that I feel like are short-term players that are going to be voted out very soon, that I feel like maybe we could have had a few more votes of getting rid of them before we hit the merge. Like, I feel like there's no possible way Sifu could be there much longer. Like, I can't see that happening. There's to me, I feel like Jay may be a short-term player as well, based on the way that they were talking about her. Like, I think that if Red lost that challenge, I think she may have gone home. And then like you said, this Bruce Katurah thing, there's no way it could last that much longer, I don't think. So I want to say that one of those two have to be probably going home soon as well. So it is interesting that we're getting the merge here at 12-13, I should say. When I don't know, I feel like that those players are probably all going to go with the next few votes, and then you're going to have that middling of Caleb and Emily in between those two big alliances. So I'm curious to see what ends up happening. Like, are people going to recognize? And we saw it. Who was the player last season? I'm trying to remember this. There was I believe it was Franny before she got voted out. That kind of called what was going to happen. She said they're in the middle. They're going to end up, going all the way to the end and orchestrating every vote unless we strike first. And I'm curious to see this season if they recognize that and actually act on it, or recognize it and kind of just let it happen. And then in that case, Caleb and Emily could end up going both to the final three. So who knows?
But Dylan, this happens a lot in 3 tribe seasons where you have a disaster tribe where obviously we can point to Philippines with Denise and Malcolm. You have, and actually I do want to bring up Philippines later with a comparison, but yeah, Philippines, you have, Cagayan with, Cass, Spencer, and Tasha going far last season with Tika 3. So this happens a lot when you have a disaster tribe. Just naturally, they're going to go far because they're not seen as a threat. Granted, Caleb is a very charismatic, athletic guy, so he could be seen as a threat. But no, they really should be positioned very well. But I guess just while we're talking about that comparison with Philippines, I feel like lately we've been comparing old seasons, and it's like, 43 was like Gabon. It was like a train wreck in a lot of different ways and stuff. To me, Dylan, this feels very Philippines because you have a Matt Singh in Emily and Caleb. And to me, Bruce is almost kind of like that Russell Swan in some ways, where Malcolm was like, all right, I'll let Russell Swan, returning player, came back from an injury, keep him around for a few votes, but he's got to go at some point. He's kind of bossing people around. And it kind of feels like it's the same thing with Caleb and Bruce, where it's like Caleb recognizes I'll keep Bruce for a little bit longer as like a target, as a shield, but at some point he's going to go. Because I kept thinking Katurah's whole story arc was going to be, I hate Bruce, and then she's going to kind of get herself voted out because she's going at Bruce so hard. That was her whole arc. But now I'm starting to think Caleb is kind of pulling Katurah in, and maybe Bruce is going to get targeted maybe even as soon as next week at this fake merge, possibly. So I see that kind of being very similar to the Philippines in some ways. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting comparison. And like you said, I think we've been getting these vibes ever since we kind of saw the disaster that this yellow tribe was. We're like, oh, maybe it's a Philippines again. But yeah, I like that comparison a lot. I think there's validity to that. And we'll have to see how it ends up playing out. Like I said, I am curious to know how far Caleb and Emily could take this thing. But let's rewind a little bit in this episode and talk about some of the stuff that happened in the beginning. And again, we haven't spoken that much about Reba, because they dominated the challenge. We did speak a little bit about Jay, in the amulet thing, but it's funny because last week's podcast, you're like, oh, I can't wait to see what happens when Red gets back to camp. Sifu's gonna be like Rupert, like, oh, who voted for me?
Who voted for me?
Literally, that was just an unreal scene where he's sitting there staring at the girls, and they were not budging and admitting who voted. And they're like, oh, Sean did it, and he's like, he said he didn't do it, and then they were like, oh shit, like I didn't think that Sean was gonna say that on the way out. So it was definitely awkward. I think that like I don't with Sifu, like what is his path in this game? There's no like he hasn't made it like a single relationship, it seems like, in the entire game, right? It seems like, like I don't know. I have no idea what to think of Sifu. Like I have no words. He does not have a relationship with any of the girls on that tribe at all, it seems. And then he's also like, he didn't really switch with anybody because when they switched the tribes, it was all original Red plus Sean. So he has not really interacted with anybody else. He's not going to have any relationships. I don't really see a way how he makes it much further in this game at all. So I think that's interesting. And I think that it was just, it was a pretty funny scene. That's all I have to say.
No, I think for Sifu, he's got to hope he gets enrolled in the Caleb school of bringing people in, like Emily and like Katsura. He's got to. No, I really do think so, because it's like, granted, we're watching from TV, we're seeing things a lot differently. That was so awkward, honestly. Him saying it was a vote, and then Julie's like, "Yeah, I don't want to talk about it right now." It was incredibly awkward. He's got to realize, if he has any self-awareness, he's got to realize they don't really like me or want to work with me. So he could defect over to Blue, and if Caleb is as good as we see him being, recognizing when people are on the outs, he's got to be like, "Hey, I'm going to pull you in so we can kind of take out the Red people, take a shot at Jay, Julie, Austin, Drew." Sifu can find a home in Blue. I really feel like someone like him who's on the outs, that's kind of a waste. You don't want to waste getting a vote out on Sifu because you're going to weaken Red. You want to weaken Red, you take a shot at the 4-person alliance. And I could easily see Sifu being brought in. And like you said, what is Sifu's path? Get brought in and get carried to Final 5 or 4th. Like, that's his best path at this point. Especially now that, because again, when we look at the advantage chart, like, other than the 3-way amulet, which Austin has, Austin and Drew have all the power in the game. They have safety without power, the sacrifice idol, because the other sacrifice idol got knocked out of the game with Sabaya. Unless the blue idol comes into play at some point, Austin and Drew have a 4-person alliance with the most firepower. So Sifu could flip and really knock out that power structure, honestly. Because also, I neglected to say, there's a 4-person alliance. You bring in Emily, that's 5. So they really got to make some leeway next week. And I think pulling over Sifu could be a great way to do that.
And I like your comparison. You're like, maybe he'll go to the basically like the Caleb school of rehab, basically, yeah, where Caleb brings in Sifu and change and basically like molds him into a player that he could work with. And that would be kind of interesting if that was like Caleb's like story, and he ends up going and winning the game. Like, if he wins the season, like, he took the people on the bottom, all the way on the bottom, who had nobody, and like, basically brought them in and like changed the way that they play the game to fit the way that he needed to play the game, which is very interesting. But yeah, we move over to Belo. So, okay, I actually have a bone to pick with this episode here. I believe the episode name was something like, I don't want to be the worm. I believe that was the episode name.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw them eating the worm at the beginning of the episode, I knew that tribe was going to tribal council, because why else would Kendra be like, I don't want to be the worm that she's eating, right? So the entire time I was like, Bella's going to tribal council, because 2 minutes into the episode, she was eating the worm. And I was like, and I knew that if she had said that she was going to be the one to say, I don't want to be the worm, right? So it's like, I'm like, okay, come on. You can't name the episode title something that kind of gives away what's going to happen.
But Dylan, here's the problem. I agree with you completely, but here's the problem. I don't think CBS cares. I think CBS makes it. No, I think they make it for a casual audience, because you and me, it's like, we hear the episode title or we watch the preview. I'm going to realize with like my memory, if I see a scene, like if I see Jake making a comment in the preview and he doesn't make that comment before the challenge, I know they're going to tribal council. Like, but CBS is not thinking that. They're thinking, oh, we're going to throw in clips for the preview. We'll name the episode title about worms. It's silly. They're not thinking, oh, super fans are going to pick up on this, tells us what's going to happen in the episode. They're not thinking that much because who's crazy enough? Us. They're not thinking about that.
Right,
So,
right. No, that's fair. And honestly, to be truth be told, usually I'm not like I don't typically look at the episode title, but this week I just happened to look at it, I guess. And of course, this was the week that I was like, oh, like if she doesn't say it now, then she's saying it later. So
yeah. But while we're at Bello, this is a big thing I want to ask you. So the last thing we saw about the Blue Tribe in the episode, before we also get a little bit more into Yellow and Red, was Brando, despite the whole Pokemon Go stuff, goes to Drew and says, hey, do you want to have a Nerd Alliance? And Drew says no. And when I first saw this, my mind was blown. I'm like, in Survivor, you never say no to an alliance publicly. The answer is always yes, because all it does is open up the door for people to target you. Because Brando's like, well, now I want to go after Drew because he turned down my alliance. Famously, Dylan, going back to Philippines, we see the most famous part about the post-merge where Lisa and Scoopin go to Penner and say, let's make an alliance. We want to work with you. And Penner's like, I want to think about it. I'm not sure. I don't want to commit to anything. And then what happens? They go to Denise and Malcolm, make a Final Four, and that's the Final Four alliance. And Penner missed out. So you never say no to an alliance. That was my thought when I saw the episode. Then I realized going back, Emily was sitting right there. And I wonder if Drew saying no publicly while Emily was sitting right there was the right thing to do. What were your thoughts on this, given these facts?
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting to just shut down an alliance like that, right? Basically to his face. I also think this is the type of thing that like you get away with when it's a smaller tribe. It's only 5 people, right? And like the lines are already drawn in the sand. So like I think you saying no, like what is that already like? They're already targeting you, right? They're already targeting you. It's already a 2 versus 2 with the swing vote, right? So it's like what does that really do? If you do say no, that being said, like that, if he said yes to that, he theoretically could have just told Emily and been like, hey, like I had to say yes, but you know, we're still voting him out. Like I just said it so that he doesn't see it come. I just said yes so that he doesn't see the vote out coming later. Like he could have easily done that. So I do think that like maybe it was not the right move because I think that like it's tough. Like if he says yes, if he doesn't say no there, do they end up voting Austin instead of Drew? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that really makes a difference or not. So it is tough. Yeah. I think that the fact that it is small tribes makes him kind of get away with it more, if that makes sense.
It also, I agree with you. I also think it's like Drew, and maybe I'm giving him too much credit. Drew also might know his audience. He might recognize that Emily's just very blunt. Emily appreciates things how they are. She doesn't like a lot of fluff. And maybe in Emily's mind, it's like, if we want to make this a 3-person alliance of Drew, Austin, and Emily, him publicly turning down an alliance means, though, he's committed to my group. He's not going to be wheeling and dealing. Because you're right. He could go to Emily afterwards and say, oh, I was just placating him. I was just saying yes to kind of get him off my trail. But Emily might, you know, with how she thinks, she might be like, but now is Drew playing me? He's just saying that, but now is he really secretly working with Kendra and Brando? And now I'm going to be taken out as a swing vote. But him publicly saying no tells her, oh no, he's committed with me. Because again, I didn't realize she was behind him in the shelter. I thought it was just a really like sloppy move from Drew. But if he had the foresight to know that Emily's listening, I want to publicly commit to her that I'm working with you, not Brando, I like it actually a bit more. So
yeah. I don't know. Maybe he did have that in mind. I don't know. But Emily, the fact that Emily was sitting right there is very interesting. In terms of like what he did. Now let's get to Lulu here quickly. Jake passes out again, which is becoming a theme. We get like a whole backstory on him, which I think, you know, we didn't necessarily need like a whole backstory, but we got a backstory for him, weight loss journey. And now it gets all the way here and is clearly struggling, you know, in the fact that he's passing out, even though he says he says he feels fine, but he keeps passing out. I don't know what to think about this. A lot of people I've been asked by multiple people, like, hey, you think Jake's eventually going to get medevac? Like, is that what, like, I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that maybe this is just like it's just happening and it's building up as like a storyline that like, or just an obstacle, like another obstacle that he has to overcome. Like, I have no idea what to think of it. Like, it's very unfortunate though, that he keeps passing out for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can interpret this in two different ways, and obviously, like we've seen lately, the edit's so hard to read. Could this mean that this is Jake's, winter story? Sure. Could it just be simply that Jeff wants to show how hard the new era is because there's lack of food? It could just be that too. I also feel like they're making too big of a deal out of lack of food. Maybe Jake wouldn't be passing out if he fed them more. But like, yeah, no, I think you can interpret it in a lot of different ways. Obviously, for my team, I hope Jake doesn't get medevaced. It's not a good looking sign. But yeah, no, I mean, I guess he's happy that Kelly's there as a nurse, and maybe he did just stand up too fast. But yeah, you're right. 2 episodes in a row almost, or like 2 out of 3 episodes, him kind of passing out. Not great sign, but I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens with that. Hopefully, that was the last of him passing out, I hope. And then, like you said before, so we also get quick scene of Katurah hunting for idols and then getting caught, and then Caleb kind of, bringing her in and being like, hey, like, work with me and you'll figure out how to play Survivor for real. Like, this is Caleb's story at this point. And yeah, Caleb, I think so. One thing I want to talk about, and then we could kind of just wrap up. I don't think we have that much more to talk about after this. But like, this is one of the things that you briefly mentioned before that I think deserves a bigger topic of conversation here. We got that quote from Caleb that he recognized that Kelly was the most connected player in the game. I believe he says, I think that Kelly's the best player on this beach. And he told her about Sabaya's idol to build the trust with Kelly. I think that was very interesting. Caleb is literally in with every single player in the game. And I was like, wow, that's like such a, like like not useless, but it's like a piece of information that's like not huge that you could use to gain someone's trust. And like the idols, like now the idol's out of the game. So like, who cares if you're kind of, it's like a, you know what I mean? It's like a piece of information that's kind of insignificant, but significant enough to like gain someone's trust. And that's why I think it was such a clever move. Now, I feel like this is kind of building up, or maybe the start of a build up, that Caleb and Kelly could end up going at each other at some point. Clearly, Caleb is recognizing against Kelly as a huge threat, maybe before anyone else is. And I certainly think that everyone's going to pick up on Caleb being a big threat at some point. So it is interesting. I don't know if this is to like build up Kelly or I don't really know what it is, but I think it's worth a conversation. Like, what do you think's happening here long term? What did you make of this whole interaction?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, Caleb every week just keeps getting, A's across the board. I mean, he's just
he's great.
He's
good.
So charismatic. And I mention this every week. I said in the pre-merge, granted, I never had a chance to draft him. He went first in our draft, but like, he is so naturally likable and charismatic that I'm like, he might just be too good and people might want to target him for it. And other than like one scene when he went to the raid, no one's mentioning like how good Caleb is. And he just is so good, the Caleb school. Again, like I said, he's just seeing people on the bottom, like Emily, Katurah, maybe Sifu, and he's going to bring them in. And like Rob Cesternino once did, you bring in the people who are the outcasts and you kind of make them your own. I really feel like Caleb recognizes, like you mentioned, Kelly is connected with Bruce. Bruce said she's his number one. She's been in good with Jake. She was in with Brando, but that's no longer an option. He recognizes that she's a powerful player. So like you mentioned, he tells her about Sabaya's idol, which is kind of a useless piece of information because it's out of the game. The only thing that you could argue it helps Kelly is like, okay, I know Caleb probably doesn't have it, nor Emily, because that idol on that beach is out of the game now. So maybe it helps her a little bit, but it's not that useful of information, but it seems helpful and that will build that trust. So I really do think that it's trying to like get Caleb in good with her, and maybe she won't go after him, but he can then take that strike. But Caleb is amassing pieces between, Katurah. I think he might go after Bruce, but I think Bruce kind of sees Caleb as a number. And then he has Emily probably, and then he went to the camp raid. So Caleb should be covered on all sides right now. And that's just a testament to how he's playing the game. And the other thing I want to mention quickly, Dylan, is like I watched a podcast this week where Rob actually had Cass on. And it's so funny because he brings in Cass because Emily has the same psych profile as Cass. And Cass is something very interesting where it's like Emily is somebody who is very blunt, like Cass is, although Emily speaks her mind more. But that almost is working to Emily's favor because people might not see Emily as deceptive because she's so upfront. Like why would Emily lie to me? She's so like outgoing with how she feels. And I think Brando even said in his exit press, he was like, I never thought Emily wasn't with me because she is so blunt that she's like, yeah, I'm with you. And I believed her because that's just how she is. So I think that actually is working to Emily's advantage, honestly.
That's so interesting. I need to listen to that podcast because I think that's so interesting. It's like her bluntness is a shield for her deceptiveness, which is we'll see if that continues. I guess, yeah, like why, like, right. Like if you're out there and, you know, she's blunt about everything, you're like, why would she lie to me? She would just probably say if she wasn't with me. Right.
And actually Cass brought up another good point about Cagayan as well, where it's like, you know, remember in the pre-merge, and you hated this. This is Dylan's biggest red flag. Sifu wants to play like Tony. Right. And you see Sifu out there, and you're like, what the hell is Sifu doing? He's kind of like unhinged. No one wants to work with him. And Cass made a very interesting comparison where it's like, Sifu was almost like Tony in Game Changers, where he doesn't have a Trish with him. He doesn't have a Sarah with him. That type of chaotic player needs someone to kind of pull them back and be like, I need to keep you in check. Kind of ironically like Caleb did with Emily. And if Sifu had like his Trish out there, like let's just say Julie was his Trish, maybe we would see Sifu be a bit more measured and a bit more in the mix of things. But Sifu is making fake idols. He's bluffing with fake idols. He's doing Tai Chi in the ocean. And I feel like Cass was saying that type of player needs a companion to really keep them in check. So I thought that was another interesting observation.
That was the one thing that we missed that we need to talk about quickly. Okay, yeah. Sifu makes a fake idol. Okay, he makes a fake idol and he tells all the girls about it. He's like, you know, one of the women will go home because he has this fake idol, right? Why do Dee and Julie think that it's a real idol if they knew that Austin found the idol? So I don't understand that. How do they think that there was two idols on the beach? This could be such a misstep that like I'm like almost in shock by it that they're like buying that he actually is an idol. And I believe that one of them said in the confessional like, oh, we think Sifu has an idol. So like at first I thought that they were just like playing it up for Jay, and now it's like they actually think that Sifu has an idol, which is just mind-boggling to me. It doesn't make any sense.
No, I wish I had an answer for you. I have no idea because they know Austin has the idol. I thought as well, like you mentioned, they're just trying to assure Jay because Jay doesn't know that. But if they're saying it in confessional to us, it makes no sense. The only thing I can think of, Dylan, is like in this era of a lot of advantages, do they think when they swapped, there's a new idol planted and Sifu got that? That's the only thing I can think of to explain why they think he has one, because they know it's Austin has the red idol, unless they think somehow they threw more advantages into the game. That's my only explanation.
I guess that's what they maybe think, and it's like the new era, so I guess you never know for sure.
And speaking of that, I'll go ahead.
No. Yeah, I was just gonna say that could be the reason. They're just probably like, oh, like just because in the past there was one idol on the beach for everyone doesn't mean that like this season, like you know that you just never know what to expect in the new era. So in terms of advantages, for sure.
I was gonna say quickly that like the other thing we saw with this was that Jay makes kind of a risky play where she's like, okay, Sifu thinks it was me. It wasn't me, but I'll own up to it to kind of help the group out, even though she's outside the numbers. And, you know, I'll claim the vote so that way Dee and Julie feel even better about me, and we can kind of like make Sifu feel comfortable so he doesn't play his idol. And then Dee, I think we both really like Dee so far. She's like, she's on the outs anyway. Maybe let's just get rid of Jay. Yeah. So I do agree with you that once we get to this fake merge, depending on how the two halves split up, I could see Jay being an easy, target at this next vote, possibly.
Dee is like unhinged villain vibes from her. She could easily turn into a villain in this season. She tried to still vote out Sifu, even though Sean said please vote me.
Get rid of me,
yeah. And now she's like, well, we could just get rid of Jay, even though like she's trying to work with us, but let's just get rid of her anyway. Like I love that. every season needs a player like that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how her game progresses as well.
So let me ask you really quickly, since I don't think we have any questions and we kind of covered everything. A big part of next week with the fake merge, like the earn the merge, whatever you want to call it, it's stupid. It's going to come down to how the two halves break up. It's going to come down to who is like on what side. But let me ask you, if we had to pick one person from yellow, blue, and red that could be in the most danger based on the splits, who do we think's in the most danger from each original tribe? Like I would say from red, it could be Sifu, but I feel like it might be Jay. I feel like Caleb might want to pull in Sifu. Jay is already kind of making D nervous, and D might want to get rid of her. So I would say Jay for red. For blue, for like the old blue, I was gonna say Katurah, but I feel like it might be more Bruce now that Caleb is kind of looking at Bruce. So I would say Jay Bruce, Mets. And then yellow. I think yellow. I think Emily and Caleb are safe. So I would say either Bruce or Jay for me, depending on how the split breaks up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's probably gonna go that way. With Jay seems like she's in big trouble. Kind of another situation where she almost is like Sifu, right? She doesn't have she doesn't really have an alliance, and like she thinks she does. That's the difference. She thinks she has an alliance with the girls. She does not. She's in big trouble. And yeah, I feel like this Bruce thing has got to come to, it may be coming to an end soon. It's just like too much. Every week we're hearing about how like overbearing, and like we keep hearing it every week. It feels like, that could be coming to a close soon. So we'll have to see the way it breaks up. Maybe they both end up being safe. And then if that's the case, then we'll have to see. Maybe we get a surprise vote out next week. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, again, that's the whole point, where until we get to the actual merge, once we get to 12, this is really going to come down to how the split breaks up. Because last season, what was it last season? Was it Matt? Because like, wasn't it like Jam? No, it was Josh. It was Josh. But like I remember the next week when they actually did split the groups up at the split challenge, it was like Jam versus Matt, and then Orange got rid of Matt to make him green. So it's it's going to really depend on how these things break up. And I'll be really curious to see going forward, Emily and Caleb, are they going to continue to work together? Or is it now like Emily's closer to red and Caleb's closer to blue, and then we end up getting them going to war against each other after Caleb brought her in? That would be the most satisfying story to me, to see, does the student surpass the master? Does Emily get rid of Caleb? Or is Caleb just going to be too good and gets rid of Emily anyway? We'll have to see.
Yeah, I'm so interested to see how this ends up playing out. But I think that is it for this week. Like always, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. Thank you everybody for watching, and we will be back next week at some point to recap episode 6.
Yep, just like this week. While we're still figuring out our Twitter, if you follow me below at my Twitter handle, I'll try my best to tweet out before the episode when we're going to go live, or before the podcast when we go live, so you can try to follow along there. But yeah, next week, Dylan, earn the merge. We'll see what happens.
Here we go. Love to see it.
Grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.